I'm Angie Torrey, and today we're going to talk about how to set the foundation for a comprehensible classroom. I surveyed my subscribers, and the majority of them said they wanted me to talk about setting the foundation, necessary steps for enabling 90 to 100% use of the target language in the classroom. I'm going to tell a little story. I hate when you go to conferences and they ramble on and on about irrelevant things. But this is actually relevant. I'll try to make it fast. Now, my husband and I remodeled our bathroom, and it took 5 years to make a million decisions and choose all the beautiful granite and materials. And then it finally came time for them to remodel the bathroom. Yay! But it took 3 months to get the not fun stuff done, the foundation. And first they had to demo, and they had to dig out the concrete, and then they had to put the plumbing in, and then the electricity, and on and on and on. And finally we got to see the pretty stuff. Now, this topic is not a sexy topic, and we always want to get to the real fun stuff, the activities for comprehensible input that get students speaking the target language. But you have to set the foundation first. It doesn't just happen. You have to create an environment that enables you, that it's optimum for comprehensible input, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And so many teachers have said to me, I tried using the target language 90 to 100%, but I gave up. I tried to use comprehensible input, but it didn't work for me. And there are a few reasons for this. Student resistance. Students didn't understand, parents complained, it's too much work. So we're going to address each of these and give a solution. And I'm going to just tell you how I set up my classroom so that students actually wanted to speak the target language, and we kept the class functioning in Spanish and French. What's missing? Why are these teachers struggling? I examined what I did to provide comprehensible input to a receptive group of students. What did I do that enabled me to use the target language 90 to 100%? Why didn't my students complain? They actually loved working in the target language, but not levels 2 and 3. And that's a topic for another workshop. I can't get into that here, but I am providing a link to talk about the challenges of teaching level 2. So you can read that. But let's see, where am I? Okay, first we're going to talk about furniture setup. It's extremely important how you set your furniture, your desks up. You want to make sure that the teacher and student desks are positioned in such a way as to allow quick and unhindered access to all the students. You don't want a barrier there. And you want a stage area so that you can make tell all your stories, do your teacher presentations, teacher talk, and all your comprehensible input. And quick access to the students is important, and you want to be able to walk around easily because proximity is one of the ways to keep students on task and engaged. I actually will be talking later about how to deal with students who come into your class, level 2 or 3, who are unprepared. The teacher desk is one of the largest pieces of furniture and can hinder your movement if not strategically positioned. Move your desk to the side or back of the room so it's not blocking your path, and so you're as close as possible to your students. Choose a design that allows you to reach every student in a few steps. After I set up my classroom, I physically walk it out to make sure I have quick access and there's no obstacle between me and the students. And my preferred arrangement positions every student actually facing me. Here is the arrangement that I use. I've also seen the U arrangement, which is very appealing to me because of the huge stage area. There are many workable arrangements. You have to experiment to see what works best for you. Number 2, But I hope I make it to the end without losing my voice. I'm struggling with a cold here. Number 2 is create a text-rich environment. To facilitate student production, I post words and phrases all over the room, high-frequency words, daily use words, classroom objects, things that they need to talk about because they use them every day, questions, and I even use Senora Cruz's clock on the wall. By the time we study how to tell time, students already know how to tell time because they've seen it on the wall. Make it easy for students to communicate and to say what they want to say. Number 3, hang a cell phone holder in your room. You need a system for cell phone use or you'll fight the cell phone monster all year. You can't compete with the lure of the phone. It works like this. Students come in, they put their phones in the phone pockets as soon as they come in, and then when they leave, they pick them up. They should only be used for emergencies or if we're playing a game or doing an activity that requires the use of the phone. And then, of course, they have to ask in Spanish or French, ¿puedo usar mi celular? For emergencies. They have to do that. And they should be transparent. I learned this the hard way. So that you can see whose phone is missing. I assign numbers to each student, or you can write their name on the pockets. And my student assistants quickly look at the beginning of class to see whose are missing. Because if students are distracted, they're not going to be able to acquire the language. So you need to make sure to set up the environment so they're all ready to get that input and receive it. Number 4, structure. It's really important to have the same routines every single day, especially when you're speaking a language students don't understand. For example, every day I start class off with bell work. Students walk in, they start working on the bell work. Then I transition to the learning target, which is they not only hear me say it, but they see it on the overhead. This is what we're going to do today, and then this is what we're going to learn, and this is what you're going to do. And then after that, we correct the homework. So essential, they see it, they hear it on the overhead. The first 3 weeks, they see Spanish and English, or French and English, and then I take off the English, and they see only the target language. So that's one way that after about 3 weeks, I'm already 90% in the target language. But I've given them the training wheels of the English to begin with, and I'm doing the same thing every day. So they know what I'm saying. After 2 weeks of hearing, hoy vamos a aprender, or hoy vamos a hacer, they understand it. So structure and routine. And this also helps students with learning disabilities. It helps all students. So do the same thing every day. Well, not the same thing, but kind of like the same routine. Number 5, the frog in the water. I have a method that's kind of like the frog in the warm water where you heat the water up hotter and hotter and it never notices it. Well, I just keep adding a little more and more of the target language so that they don't notice. And one day we're speaking 90 to 100% Spanish and they didn't even notice it. So what I do is from the very beginning, I tell them, we're going to go to all Spanish or we're going to go to all French so that they're prepared. And every day I tell them that. So, well, what would you have done in this instance if you could not have used English? You need to be prepared for that because we're going to go to all Spanish or we're going to go to all French. And so they get used to the idea that they can't rely on the English because it's going to be taken away from them. And they learn to focus on the message and not on translation, which I'm so against translation that I have an entire blog post dedicated to what to do instead of translation. Not that you don't ever use it, but it's the last tool I would use. So I tell them that eventually we're going to go to all Spanish or French. But they don't know that eventually means 3 weeks or 4 weeks, depending on the level. Okay. Number 6, build students' confidence. The first couple of weeks, especially in Spanish 1, I reward guessing, and I train students to guess. It's a game, it's fun, and I reward all guesses, correct and incorrect. I reward all answers with points, correct or incorrect. And I say, well, who can guess what I just said? And they raise their hand. Oh, well, that's a great guess. Good. Then I say, when they find out what it means, I say, well, how many of you guessed the correct guess, the correct answer? And when most of them raise their hands, I say, see how well you're doing? Because in the beginning, they're a little apprehensive. I won't be able to do this. But then they realize, well, hey, I can guess, and most of the time I guess correctly. So build students' confidence. Number 7, las frases sutiles, des phrases utiles. I give students a list of essential words and phrases that they will need to function in the target language. And then we practice, practice, practice. I give them just a few every day, and we practice in class. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, I give them a test on it. And then the next step is the most important. I have to be consistent. It's myself I have to train, not the students. You have to train yourself, not the students. For example, after students take the test, I tell them, after you take the test, anytime that you say anything that's on that list, I won't understand you. And after the specified all target language date, I will not understand you. So when students try to speak to me in English then, every time I just smile and I say, lo siento, no entiendo. It's not a confrontation. It's just a gracious way of saying, I don't understand you. What I'm trying to do here is set up a native speaker environment. What would you do if you were in a Spanish-speaking country and you needed to communicate a message? You would find a way. Now, this is assuming, and this is a big assumption, that this is a comprehensible input classroom and not an immersion classroom. By that I mean I'm not standing up there going brrrr. I'm doing everything I can to make my message understandable to the students, either by using visuals or by repetition or by gestures or the many different ways that you can provide comprehensible input. If I'm giving them way too many words that are above their level, then their brain will not be able to understand it. Comprehensible input has to be only slightly above what they already understand, and we're going to get into that a little later. The consequence is that students will not be able to communicate their message, and invariably, eventually, they figure out how to do that. Number 8, teach the commands and the classroom objects first. I start with the commands because you want students to be able to do what you say in the target language. And you say the same things every day. By the end of the year, you probably said the same things thousands of times. So why say them in English? I practice a few every day, and we make it a game, so it's really super fun. I'll give maybe 10 at a time, and we practice. They watch me, then they do it as I do it, and then I stop doing it, and they still do it, and then we do competitions to see which side does it the fastest. And then when they get even better, we have individual competitions where I number them all off. And I spend several weeks, probably an entire month really, on the commands, and then I give them the list. I don't let them see it before they learn it. I want them to get used to hearing it, and then I let them see it. And then, of course, I test them on it. And then I take the training wheels off. And of course they need to learn the classroom objects because they're going to be asking for them and using them and talking about them all the time. So this is a way to quickly get students to function in the target language and to be able to talk to them and tell them what to do in the target language. Number 9, provide an escape. Now I do this. I haven't heard of anyone else that does it, but it works very well for me. And so you've gone to all the Spanish or French, and every day there are going to be things that you say that students won't understand. And every day they're going to want to say things to you that they don't know how to say. So how do you deal with that? Well, I actually reward them for not knowing. Reward, reward, reward. For example, I practice. I purposely say things I know they don't know, and I teach them how to say, well, what did you say? ¿Qué quiere decir? ¿Qué significa? Que veut dire? And we practice it until they all can pick it out. And I say, you don't have to pronounce it exactly. I know you don't know the word, so I know you don't know how to say it. You just have to kind of say it well enough so I can kind of figure out what it is that you don't know. And then I'll write the word on the board, and that becomes a bonus word on the test. But the main thing is they get a point because they asked me what I said. The dumber you are, the more points you get, sort of. So I reward them for asking me, well, what did you say? But they have to say, ¿Qué quiere decir? And the word that I said that they don't understand. And the same is true if they want to say something. I teach them how to say, ¿Cómo se dice? ¿Cómo dit-on? And then they say the word in English that they don't know how to say, and then I write it on the board and it becomes a bonus word for the test. And so that's their escape, and it lets out a little of the tension off. Because you're learning the language, I don't expect you to know the language. I've seen many teachers give up on the goal of conducting the class in the target language because they caved to student pressure. What? What are you saying? We don't understand you. Speak English. When I was a new teacher, I made the mistake of giving immersion, but not providing comprehensible input, and it's not the same thing. It must be just a little bit more than they know, what they know plus a few words, not what they know plus 50 words that they've never heard before. So that brings us to number 10. Provide sufficient repetition in context and have a large repertoire of comprehensible input activities, strategies, resources. When my students were not ready to produce, when I thought they were, I realized I haven't given them enough repetition in context. 2 stories is not enough. So I need some videos or some listen and draw activities, videos, games, charades, bingo, run to the board, teacher talk, objects and realia, novels, TPRS stories, graphic organizers, audio, songs, whatever. They just need to hear that language many more times in context before they're ready to use it themselves. And I will provide a link so that you can get a list of a lot of different ways you can provide a comprehensible input. And I said I would get back to what do you do when students come into your class in the 2nd and 3rd level, you haven't taught them, and for whatever reason they are not prepared. And so when you're speaking to them, your students are getting what they already know plus a little bit more. But these other students are getting what they already know plus 50 or 100, so there's no way that they can function in the target language. And that's what my blog post talks about. It gives you some strategies to use to help those students so they can be on the same page. So another important factor is the stress that you feel when you have to cover the material. Now, I taught on the block schedule, so that was the biggest stress of my teaching, was how am I going to cover this material? Because it does not matter what you teach, it matters what they learn. And it's time to move on to the next concept or topic, but I haven't given them enough repetition and context, so what do? Well, what I do is I give them enough repetition and context for this to stick and figure out what I'm going to leave out. Number 11. And now this one may seem obvious, but it is crucial. Set up a classroom management system with rewards and consequences and consistently enforce them. If students aren't listening, there's no way they can acquire the language. So Teach the rules and procedures like you would any other learning target. Practice them like you would any other learning target, and test them. One way I practice with students, for example, to raise your hand. By the way, if your rule is to raise your hand when you speak, but then when students talk to you without raising your hands and you answer, that's not your rule. The rules are not the ones on the poster in your classroom. The rules are not the ones you sent home. The rules are the ones you enforce. So I spend time practicing with students how to raise their hand to speak and then when to answer in chorus. And so we practice until it becomes second nature. When I make this sign, you all answer in chorus. When I do this, you all raise your hand. Or if I don't do this, but you have whatever system you have, you practice it with them, and then you enforce it every time. So most of what I know for classroom management and instructional strategies I learned from Fred Jones, by the way, Fred Jones Tools for Teaching. I must have either attended or facilitated the workshop at least 15 times. If students aren't listening, they're not learning. You'll be up there doing a song and dance, and they'll be annoyed because you're interrupting their social time. What I did after I tested them on the rules, and the one that was the most important to me was the raising of the hand, so I'll tell you how I handled that. So if they said something without raising their hands, if it wasn't too noticeable, then I just ignored them, and the consequence was they didn't get their question answered or they didn't get the point. If it was noticeable, then I gave them a warning. And the third time, or second time depending, I gave them detention every time. So consistency, consistency, consistency. And once again, it's yourself you have to train, not the students. Number 12, use positive tension in the lesson. I remember once I went to a staff meeting, and there was a professional development going on. And a very good teacher was up there telling us what we were going to do. And then she said, okay, get in your groups and do this. But she didn't tell us she was going to call on us, and we had to perform afterwards. And we all went, oh, yay, social time. We never get to see each other. Well, if we do that, it's basic psychology, right? Students are going to do that too. We can't expect anything less from them. So what I do, what I call tension, a good tension, you just put a little bit of it in the lesson. So you start the lesson right at the beginning and you tell students, this is what we're going to learn, this is part of the routine, and this is what you're going to do at the end. If she had told us, and then in the end we're going to call on you at random and you're going to present, we would have hustled. And that's what I do to my students. I say, this is what we're going to learn, and then this is what you're going to do at the end to demonstrate mastery. For example, there's going to be a competition, or you're going to do a presentation, or you're going to get up with your partner and do a little dialogue, whatever. And it works best if it's that very day, especially the younger the students. So that's a little way to put tension in. Another way is to have them put their names on little sticks and say the question, pause again, wait, and then call a student's name. And so they don't know who's going to be called on, so they're all listening. Now, if you say the question and immediately call on someone, then the rest of the class is off the hook. Another way to put some positive tension in is to assign an activity that they have to do, maybe in pairs or groups, and then you put a timer on the overhead or on the screen, and so they see exactly how much time they have to do this. Don't make it open-ended, or don't make it impossible, but so it's a positive tension that motivates you, not the negative kind that make you tense. And I have a link again to a blog post that talks about this, so you can see many different ways of getting students to focus by using positive tension. Now that you've created an optimum environment for comprehensible input, let's get to the fun stuff. All the resources and activities that help students understand the language. And if you'd like a recap or to go more in depth on any of these topics, make sure to download the document with all the links.